Welcome to Anchored and Sent. I'm Ken, and let's talk about where God shows up in our everyday life. Hey everybody, welcome back to Anchored and Sent. I'm your friend Ken, and thanks for hanging out with me for a little while as we do it live. So I just want to let you know, I've decided not to do any editing, and I don't have time to make 100 recordings or do editing, so we're just going to keep this real. If something crazy happens, well, it is what it is. Because this is not about perfection. This is you and I hanging out and talking about life together. So I'm excited to tell you this podcast can now be found on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone was able to use whatever platform they like to use for streaming their podcasts. So something about me is that I don't get much sleep. You know, my mind is just always thinking and I'm just always doing. But I do get signs of when I need to get more than like 3 to 4 hours of sleep, right? For example, the other day, my wife opened the fridge and she asked, is there a bag of Doritos inside the fridge? And, you know, I did what any dad would do. I blamed my teenage daughter. I was like, man, you know Nat Bug, who by the way is my teenage daughter and who is about to start their freshman year of high school. So I was like, yeah, you know, it's probably Nat Bug. And no, I'm definitely not ready for her to go to high school, by the way. So anyways, there's that. So later that day, I kid you not, I can't make this stuff up. I was searching everywhere for my sunglasses because I needed to go out and cut the grass, and it was bright, and I just want to wear shades, and I got really frustrated, man. I was like, where in the world are my sunglasses? I always put them in the same spot, and I kid you not, I went inside, and I was like, well, I guess it just wasn't meant to mow today. Lucky me. And then I went and reached on top of my head, and there they were. And I was like, oh my gosh. So friends, there's no judging here, right? Because we're not editing. We're just keeping it real with my friends and us Jesus freaks, right? So I was really excited because when my brother called me today, actually, and it was my brother in Christ, Derek. And if you know from episode 1, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you didn't catch it, I encourage you to do so. But he called me and he was like, dude, there's like a ton of people lined up in front of my house expecting free guitar lessons. He goes, Kristen, his wife, he was like, we're just trying to find a place where to put all these people. And I just started laughing. I was like, yeah, right. But at the end of it, man, he was like, great job. I'm proud of you. And it was cool to know that somebody actually listened to this thing, right? And so, yeah, that was pretty cool. And so anyways, what I like to do is I like to just, at the end of the day, go back or at the end of the week and just think about, man, where was God today? And I'd like to share those things with people when I'm talking to them. And I love for people to tell me like something crazy that might have happened and how God just showed up. And so this week I want to share a couple of them. I mean, I had several, but these two just stuck with me most of the week. So I met a buddy of mine for lunch, and before our food came out, I did something that I've started doing not too long ago. And what I started doing to get more used to or more comfortable with evangelizing or offering someone prayer, before I blessed my food, I just started asking the waiter or waitress if they would like to join us, right? And I'll be honest, since I've started, it's felt awkward, but I just do it. And you never really know how somebody's going to respond. I mean, sometimes they look at me like I'm just some creepy guy, right? Some of them just, they say, no, sir, I'm good. And then sometimes, they might throw a biscuit or salsa at me, and that's okay, right? It is what it is. I mean, they throw stones back in Jesus' time and things, so I'm like, okay, a butter biscuit ain't gonna hurt me too bad. Sometimes, and actually, believe it or not, more than not, they say, yeah, sure. And so I didn't really know what to think this week, but well, with this particular situation, but I asked this young lady who was our waitress if I said, look, we're about to bless our food. Is there anything that we can pray for you about? And she said, yeah, there is, and I'm not going to share that. But then I asked, well, do you want to join us? And she did. And so, you know, we prayed with her, and it wasn't no fancy prayer like scripted or anything. It was just true, genuine caring about somebody and praying. I felt like there should have been applause or something because I felt like the prayer was so amazing. But that's not, that just doesn't happen that way. But we prayed and she left and we started eating, my buddy and I, and she came by to check on us to see how we were doing. And she looked me right in the eyes and I could see them, kind of watering up. And she goes, you know what? It's been a really long time since somebody has prayed for me. Gosh, I, that kind of made me sad, but also happy that we were able to at least let her feel like someone cares. Because God cares for all people. And I think sometimes we just get overlooked, or maybe we just hang out with people that don't pray. And so, I don't know, that one just stuck with me all week. I kept thinking about her and I keep lifting her in prayer. And I'll be honest, I can't even remember her name. I can't even remember to comb my hair in the morning. But I know that God knows, right? And so there's another God sighting that happened on Saturday. And I'll just begin by saying, I don't get many Saturdays to drive out of town about 3.5 to 4 hours and hang out with my son and my daughter-in-law. But, I drove Friday night and it took most of the night and got to his house and had about 2 hours sleep. And anyways, we haven't fished together in a while. So we woke up early and we headed out fishing. My son's been telling me about these cool spots that he's found out in East Texas and this and that. And anyway, so we take off in the little John boat. And when I say the little John boat, it's the old 80 model, they got the little 3 sections you could sit. So, I mean, this little, where we put in looked like a ditch, a little bayou. I mean, there wasn't much to it. I mean, if you're from Louisiana, it kind of looked like the swamps, right? And so he goes, and I was just looking at him like, are you sure about this? He's like, Dad, I got you. Don't worry about it. I know the way. I know where all the logs are at. And I was like, the logs? All right, man. So we were going through this tiny little sketchy looking waterway, and I tell you, I was uh pretty nervous about it the whole time. And then we get to this little part and he's like, okay, this is where it gets a little sketchy. And I'm like, what about the rest of the rest of the ride that we just went through? That was pretty sketchy. He goes, no, I need you to sit in the front and be on log duty. And I'm like, wait, what? Log duty? You're talking to the blind guy, right? Why would you put me up there? So, I did it. So I was up on the very front of the John boat, and it gets real narrow right there. And I was looking over, and, I was trying not to squirrel because I squirrel all the time. I'd be like, ooh, bird, or ooh, what kind of animal is that? Oh, I better look for logs, right? And we got there, and yeah, no issues. We had no problem at all. So I was like, oh, gosh, I did a good job. So we finally get to our spot, and of course, just to give you a summary, I mean, I got outfished. Every little tiny catfish I caught, I got finned. We were using some strange, stinky concoction of liver mixed with Kool-Aid. I don't know, and it smelled like garlic. But we did catch a lot of fish. It's just, yeah, my son did a lot better on that. So, anyways, we had a good day. I can't remember exactly how many we caught because I can't remember anything, right? But we came home, or we were heading home, and the same thing, because the first part you go through is the sketchy part. I was like, man, I got this. So as I was standing there, I didn't see any logs, but all of a sudden, bam! And you'll never believe this, but I went overboard. And let's just say there's probably different versions of that story, but all I know is that I went right in. And the only thing I was really worried about, because the water felt kind of good, to be honest, was making sure my phone didn't get messed up, or my wallet, right? So, anyways, so that happened. And I think God was definitely in that moment, because I didn't injure myself. And, well, my son was just cracking up. So at least, he has that memory. So then it gets a little better. Fishing was done. We went out to eat, had a wonderful time eating lunch at my daughter-in-law's favorite place to eat Italian food in East Texas. And I was kind of leery about that, but it ended up being really good. So we get to their house, and my son's like, Dad, you got to ride my dirt bike. I've got 2 of them. I want you to start with this one, the one that I just want you to try it out. And so, well, I looked at it and I was like, okay, cool. I mean, this thing looks tiny. I mean, I could barely fit on it. My knees are up high. And I was thinking, well, I love my son, and we'll see what happens. I trust him, right? And so I get on this thing, and I kid you, I'm like, if anything happens, all I gotta do is stand up. So what's the worst that could happen? So we get it cranked up, and he pulls out this other one, and the big one, right? The one that's, oh, this is too fast, Dad. You need to start on that one first. You gotta get used to it. So anyways, as he's doing that, I pull back on the handle, and boom, I take off. And I'm like, oh gosh, this thing's not turning. It's tiny. And I kind of freaked out, right? And I made it go faster, and I went right into a huge thing of bushes. And so it was pretty painful. I was like, oh gosh. So of course I look around. I'm like, hey, cool. Nobody saw that. So I backed it up, and I started going forward. Now I think my son probably got a good idea that something happened, because, I had part of the sticker bushes still on my back, and, my leg was bleeding a little bit. But anyways, it made me feel better to think that maybe he didn't notice. So here I go. Everything looks great. And actually, after that, I got the hang of it. And so then he was like, okay, I think you've done better. So let me show you this one. And anyways, I got on the bigger one, and it was a lot of fun. So I just wanted to bring these up because, it's when kids are growing up with you, your son or daughter, Saturdays just happen. It's like a part of everyday life. And then all of a sudden, they grow up, and you just don't get that anymore. And so I kept just thinking about how thankful I was, even with the cuts and bruises and, soaking wet. My wallet had to dry out, and all that good stuff. I kept thinking, I got to spend time with my son, and that was such a blessing. It really is. And so all week, those 2 stories kept bouncing around in my head. It was the waitress, Saturday with my son. And at first, they didn't really seem to connect at all. I mean, one happened in a restaurant, right? And the other on a lake and on a country road. One was quiet and peaceful, and the other one, well, I ended up me landscaping, right? But I couldn't quit thinking about them. And then it just hit me. Neither one felt like a big spiritual moment while it was happening, right? They just felt like life. It wasn't until later that I realized that I think God was in both of those moments. I mean, they reminded me of one of my favorite stories in the Bible. If you remember, or if you don't know, it was Jesus right after he rose from the dead, and he was with 2 disciples, and they were walking to Emmaus. And they're talking about everything that's happened. They're confused. They're trying to make sense of life. And while they're walking, Jesus comes alongside him, and they don't even recognize him. So think about that. They spend time with Jesus. They have a conversation with Jesus. They walk down the road with Jesus, and they don't even realize it's him until later. I've always loved that story because I think that's happened to me more than once, right? Something happens during the week. It's like a conversation. Maybe lunch with friends. Maybe it's a Saturday with family. Maybe it's a moment at work. And at the time, it just feels like, just another day, right? But then maybe driving home later, or maybe lying in bed, you start going back over that day. And every once in a while, I catch myself saying, I think God was there. Just like in the story of Emmaus. And I start thinking, maybe he was standing beside a table while a waitress joined me in prayer. Maybe he was holding on to her during that prayer. Maybe he was reminding me not to take Saturdays with my son for granted. Or maybe, don't always focus on tasks and make time for family. And so maybe he was there all along. It's just I didn't recognize him until later. And so that's what I'm going to do this week. I'm going to slow down just enough to look back. And not because I want to live in yesterday, right? You always want to look forward. Because I don't want to miss where God has been walking beside me that day. He's always there. But where do I need to pay attention more? And friends, if you have one of those moments this week, I would absolutely love to hear about it. It doesn't have to be no huge miracle. You don't have to talk about, your wife walked on water or anything like that. It might just be a conversation. It may be a funny moment. It may be something you did. You made a bad choice, but ended up being okay. It might have been something, I have no idea. God shows up in everything. It's just, where do you notice him? And those are the stories I want to hear, because we're not alone. We're never alone. God is always with us. It's just, are we going to recognize him and talk to him during our day? And so I would love to hear those stories and actually share those on some future episodes. People need to hear how God is actively still at work. And I promise, if you reflect each day, something will start connecting. And it may be small, it may be funny, but I believe God has a sense of humor. And I can tell you all kinds of stories of why I even think that. But there's several times I'm like, okay, God, I see you. I see what you're doing here. And so send me an email about your experience, and you can do that at anchoredandsent@gmail.com. And so make sure to spell out the word and, A-N-D, and not use the symbol like in the podcast. So friends, thanks for hanging out with me today. I hope these stories give you encouragement, because the truth is, God is always actively at work. We just need to learn to recognize it. And when we do, let's share it. Let's just tell somebody about how God just showed up in a moment you just did not expect. So until next time, stay anchored in Christ and be ready for where he sends you next. Friends, peace and grace be with you. Thanks for joining in.